I would like to warmly welcome you on the third meeting with science. First of all, I would like to welcome our rector, Professor Leszek Domański. Then it is great honor for me to welcome other rectors and deans from our university, and of course, it is a great pleasure and honor to welcome Professor Schouler Ocak from big applause, because the lecture is going to be very, very interesting and yeah, it's going to be great, and I know it. Hopefully you've seen our short movie regarding this lecture and the subject that she's going to tell us about. Professor Samochowiec, director, could you tell us some few words regarding Professor Ocak, Professor Schouler Ocak, and together with the rector? Yeah.
I see all eyes full. Thank you very much for coming. It is a special day for us. We have the next open lecture for our students, our guests. Fantastic. I see young people, and we have the fantastic guest, our Professor Meryam Schouler Ocak. Ocak. I have to explain something what is important today, because the psychiatry, it is some special in not only science, in the heart of our population. Some problems we have the same in Germany than in Poland, and with migrants and refugees. It is absolutely what is important for us, and for them in Germany is very interesting. Then this lecture today, I hope so will be that's fantastic what we have today. Thank you very much for coming, our honored guest. And about Professor, I hope so that Jerzy tell some words, warm words. And today we have cream la cream, because Professor Samochowiec, our honored guest, are the board of European Psychiatric Association. As this cream la cream for you today in our honor.
Dear colleagues, Rector, I'm deeply honored to welcome you here. For the first time, I see so many people at the lecture of psychiatry, so I hope it will be a good step forward to learn about these issues, which sometimes are not so very much common in our everyday life. Professor Schouler Ocak is a fantastic person, researcher. She is a head and senior researcher and head of department of St. Hedwig Krankenhaus Charité University. It is the biggest medical university in Europe, actually. She's also member of, she is a chair of ethic committee, European Psychiatric Association, also a member of World Association of Women Mental Health, so transcultural psychiatry. So those topics are issues which she deals with. She wrote, I learned today, 8 books. One about the suicidality among different cultures last week. And now I'm deeply honored that she will talk with us on ethical dilemmas from mental health care for migrants and refugees, the topic which I think is highly actual, especially at these times in the middle of Europe. So, Meryam, if I could say, the floor is yours, please.
Good afternoon together. Mr. Rector, Mrs. Dean, and Professor Samochowiec, dear colleagues, thank you so much inviting me to Stettin. I'm very happy to be here. I'm very pleased and honored. It's a pleasure for me now to present you my talk on facing ethical dilemmas of mental health care for migrants and refugees. As Professor Samarovic underlined, I am a specialist on cultural psychiatry. I'm a professor for intercultural psychiatry and psychotherapy, which is a really very unique professorship in Germany. And we have also one professor in Montreal on transcultural psychiatry and another in UK on cultural and social psychiatry. And these are the only professorships on migration and refugees or forcibly displaced people. So it's important to be visible, therefore, in different parts of the world, and therefore I'm very happy to be here. So I will give you, first of all, an introduction, an overview on refugees in Europe, mental health of migrants and forcibly displaced people, refugees, of course, and then go on with, of course, ethical dilemmas and concerns, and conclude my presentation with some recommendations and some information. So first of all, looking to the statistic in 2020, looking to international migrants, we had more than 281 million people who were at that time international migrants in different parts of the world. But looking to the forcibly displaced people, these are data from 8th of October in this year, more than 20.6 million people were forcibly displaced. And the most hugest part of these people were internally displaced. You can see it here. It doesn't work? Okay. More than 68 million of them were internally displaced, and approximately 38 million of them were refugees. Looking to the data again, you can see that 47 million of these displaced people were children, so minors. In my opinion, this is a shame for all of us that we have so many displaced people over the world. And looking to the largest forced displacement flows across borders, 1980 till 2022, you can see that the developments are very different, and you can see that, for example, till 2012, the numbers were in single years high. For example, in 91, you know, the war in ex-Yugoslavia was going on, and therefore we had a huge number of forcibly displaced people. But in 2012, 13, 14, you know that there are a lot of wars going on in Near East, and therefore we had a lot of people from Syria. You know the news in Syria, the government was damaged, or the monarch Assad has went to Russia and so on. So there will be more changes in these areas. And so we had a lot of people from Syria, followed by, for example, people from Venezuela. In the year 2018, a lot of people were forcibly displaced, but most of them were internally displaced or in neighbor countries. Then in 2020, you know, the war against Ukraine started, and therefore we have a lot of crossing borders by Ukrainian refugees or forcibly displaced people. And looking to the countries of origin for these forcibly displaced people, you see that Syria is at the top, followed by Venezuela, Ukraine, Afghanistan, and other countries. And the main receiving countries or hosting countries, in the first part is Turkey. We have received more than 3.6 million forcibly displaced people, refugees in Turkey, followed by Colombia, Germany, Pakistan, Uganda, and so on. But there is also Poland mentioned. You see that Poland is at 7th point. So you also have received many forcibly displaced people, mainly from Ukraine. I will get back to this point later. The ways to Europe are really very different. You know, 2016, there was an agreement between Europe and Turkey, so the borders were closed, and the way through Balkan, the route through Balkan was closed. So people managed it to arrive in Europe in using other ways. For example, ways route European part, or crossing the Mediterranean Sea. So people find ways to reach all these countries. You can build borders or other issues, walls and so on, but people manage it still. And just to mention, migration is a process which is not a new process, which is not seen since 10 years or 20 years and so on. Migration belongs to the human lives, human beings. It exists till we are existing. So therefore, people are always on the move. Some people crossing the Mediterranean Sea, you can see that it's not very nice position to be in such a boat, and you don't know if you will succeed to arrive in a country or not. Another boat, you can see that it can fail. You can be in a huge danger. We have many patients who reported us stories which are really striking. And one woman, I will tell her story. She was from Syria. She couldn't take the Balkan route because the way was closed, but she tried to come to Egypt and Libya and so on, and then find some people who support her to cross the Mediterranean Sea, and their boats come in danger, and they had to decide to reduce the weight of the boat, and they decided to throw people, young people, children into the water to have again a right weight for the boat. So it was terrible because her child died at that time, and she told me the story, and I can imagine how big her burden, her suffering is. It's a terrible issue. Crossing the border, you stay alive, and your child dies in your front, and you cannot do anything because other people held you, and you are really fixed, and of course you are traumatized, and so on. I have heard many stories like that. And this is a touching picture. It was a very small child. It died crossing the Mediterranean Sea. So if we look to the data, more than 30,000 people died. These are known numbers crossing the Mediterranean Sea. These are only known numbers between 2013 and 2024. So it is very important to know that I'm sure that there are many other people died, and we couldn't recognize or know these numbers because nobody looked for them. These are first-time asylum applications in EU countries. You can see that the numbers increased in 2020, more than 20% in comparison to 23, of course, because of Ukrainian war. And these are numbers of asylum applications in Europe, just to show you the facts. So you can see, for example, that the European Union has received more than, it is only in 2020, more than 632,000 people applied for asylum. And you can see that 310,000 of these asylum applications were approved or accepted, but more than 321,000 more people were rejected. But they are still in Europe. They are still in these countries and going the processes again and again, but they are not deported or brought back to their homes. So looking to the positions, so Germany is the highest position. They have received more applications in comparison to France, Spain, Italy, and so on. But if you look to Poland, it's very down if you in the list. So Poland in 2020 received only 5,190 applications for asylum, and most of them were accepted. Only 445 people were rejected. So in comparison to Germany, this is a huge difference. So looking now to refugees or forcibly displaced people from Ukraine, these are data from by the end of 2024, October. 4.2 million people from Ukraine were at that time forcibly displaced. That means that they have crossed the borders to Europe, and of course because of the consequences of the war in Ukraine. And if you look to the data, Germany has received 1,140,000 refugees at that time, and Poland had received 983,000, also a huge number of refugees from Ukraine. And looking to the data in comparison to the native population, to your population, Poland is, after Czech Republic, the second country in which the most, in comparison to the native population, host second high rate of Ukrainian refugees or displaced people. We know that all these peoples crossing borders, leaving their homes because of war or other conflicts, have risk factors before the migration issue itself. So, for example, exposure to war, like people from Ukraine, or persecution, like people from Syria, or economic hardships because of maybe climate change or other issues. But also during the migration process itself, as mentioned before, from this story of a Syrian woman who has to see how her son died, and so on. There are other issues which they have experienced during the migration itself. And after the migration, it is not clear because they received a country in which they may be secure, but there are other many risk factors facing them. For example, poor living conditions, social isolation, of course, acculturation, stress or difficulties, and so on. So they face a lot of risk factors. They have these risk factors which have huge impact on their mental health conditions, on their mental health well-being, and so on. So these pre-migration traumatic events, pre-migration issues are listed in this slide. For example, here, confined to home could be seen in refugees from Ukraine or from Syria, or murder or death of family members. I had many patients from Syria who saw that their relatives were killed and so on in their they were observers at that time and eyewitness at that time, and so on, combat and so on. There are many issues which they had to go through, life-threatening events, and mostly they do not have one life-threatening event. They have a list of many of these issues, and of course, these issues have huge impact on their well-being and mental health conditions. And we know that people on the move, nearly 60% of all refugees live in cities, as camps are increasingly becoming an option of last resort. So not only outside of the city, but also in the city. In Berlin, Tegel, for example, the former airport is now a shelter for newcoming refugees from Ukraine, from other parts of the world. And I visited this shelter, and it is really precarious in which conditions these people have to live there. I feel really shame when I visit this location and see that they are living, for example, in boxes with 10 people together, beds in a row, and they are together with men, females, and males are in a room, and they are not relatives, and some really strange people whom they never saw before, and there is no closed door. 7 days, 24 hours, lights are on, and they do not have a door. It's open. Everybody can see everything, and it's really, I cannot describe it. In these conditions, I'm sure if I had to live in these conditions, I will also get ill. So there are many publications which underline that living conditions like which I reported about Tegel made the people really in the rate of their, or prevalent rates of mental disorders like PTSD, like anxiety, depression increased in this condition significantly. This is well known. And gender-based violation and other issues are going on. If I am married, I do not know how to live with my man, and I don't know in such conditions it is not possible. One study which we did 2016 on female refugees, this was a representative study in Germany done in different parts, for example, in Rostock or other parts of Germany. We interviewed these females, and these were face-to-face interviews. More than 2 hours were used for it in their native languages. We wanted to know which kind of life-threatening or events do you had before the migration, but also during the migration. We wanted to know, did you experience these issues did you saw these issues, or did you have heard about these? Because all three ways, self-experience, eyewitness, and have heard of, are possibilities to create or to induce trauma-related stress disorders, for example, PTSD and others. So our target group reported that murder of family members or friends were mentioned, or violent attack by a friend or family or another issue was a combat mission in the war or stay in the war zone and so on. And many of these females had a lot of traumatizing life events experienced in the past. As self-experience, many of them also saw these issues, and some of them heard about issues which were done to people whom they know, whom they are emotionally close to. So the most people or females in this study were really high burdened and had huge number of PTSD, anxiety, depression, and so on. I will come back to results again. Again, the post-migration stress factors. If you experience before the migration, during the migration, and after the migration these difficulties, you do not have the possibility to reactive your resilience factors, your skills, your coping strategies, and so on. For example, due to separation from family, barriers of family at home, or other issues like immigration officials and so on, and you do not have access to work in many countries, so you are not able to employ you or have really sense of belonging and other issues. And these factors are also inducing trauma-related disorders. So in a study done in Australia, the colleagues find that impressively post-migration stress factors like lack of integration possibilities, if you do not have the possibility to learn the language, to get in touch with the natives and so on, you cannot learn the language. Or if you have a PTSD, you cannot concentrate and so on, you cannot learn the language and you are not able to get integrated and so on. Employment issues, of course, educational opportunities, but also low social networks, unclear resident status, people in shelters and others, and so on. All these factors contribute to the development of trauma sequelae. Another issue is maybe 20 years ago, a colleague in Netherlands, Kees Laban, he was the former chair of the Transcultural Psychiatry section of World Psychiatric Association. They found at that time, working with Iraqi refugees or asylum seekers, that, for example, different post-migration living problems, for example, family issues, asylum procedure-related issues, if the asylum procedures took in the part many years, not only 5 months, 6 months, maybe 5 years, 10 years, and so on. So it was really very hard for these people to go all to have to live these facts. And strongest relationship with psychopathology was mentioned again in these problems: family separation, asylum procedure-related issues, work-related issues, and so on. And at that time, 20 years ago, they appealed to government to recognize the serious mental health impact of a long asylum procedure and to do all they can to shorten these procedures. In some countries it is shortened, but in Germany we try to shorten it, but we cannot succeed till now. Another issue was that they encouraged to allow asylum seekers to work and to give preference to family reunification and so on. In Poland, I read that you allow the refugees to work after 6 months, but in Germany it is not clear. They are not allowed. They have to go many procedures and so on, also in other parts of the European parts. And colleagues also mentioned that mental health workers should recognize the importance of these post-migration living problems and consider focusing their treatment on coping with these problems instead of focusing on trauma. So this is a very important issue. We do not should take all these traumatized people and treat them. Of course, we should do it, but we should also integrate the people in our daily life, like giving them the possibility to work, giving them the possibility to have private accommodations, and to take part in our daily life and in our social networking and so on, which are really much better for them and much better to activate their resilience factors, coping strategies, and others. If we look to the mental health of these people, refugees, displaced people, and so on, which have really a high burden of mental disorders, they have post-traumatic stress disorders, of course, depression, anxiety, substance use, but also prolonged grief disorders and others. And in our study, which we did 2017 in Berlin, we found that people who have the hugest burden and the severest mental ill problems do not receive the help which they needed. So people who had lower mental health problems received much more mental health care possibilities. This is very important to know. Another issue is the rates, prevalent rates in adult refugees and asylum seekers. Some dates from meta-analysis and systematic reviews. These data show that more than 30% of these people had a post-traumatic stress disorders, prevalence rates, and also more than 50% of them have depression. In comparison to these data, the data in the normal population was around 1 to 12%. That means that almost every third person with refugee backgrounds or experienced refugee issues and so on suffers from a psychological trauma disorders. This is a huge number. And looking to anxiety disorders, it was around 11%, and psychotic issues around 1.5%. We know, by the way, that racism or racistic discrimination increases the rate for psychosis double in twice in comparison to other migrants and refugees. We have many needs for asylum seekers. I do not want to go all these issues. So it is, I think, very important that they should have really private housing. They should have the possibility to work, to be integrated. Of course, we need the possibility to communicate and so on. What I would like to underline is also the position or the situation of irregular migrants. We have also irregular migrants with undocumented migrants. For example, in 2023, we had more than 385,000 irregular migrants which crossed the borders, and more in comparison to 2020, this number increased. Looking to these migrants, we know that they are much more vulnerable in comparison to others. So in a study in Netherlands, they reported that 37% of these irregular migrants had really adverse life events and physical assaults or sexual assaults and other issues. And we know also that over the past years, the social political climate has been marked by pervasive anti-immigrant rhetoric, policies and actions, leading to increased distrust, fear, and mistrust with undocumented communities, but not only in these communities, also in the communities of asylum seekers and refugees and so on. This is not only in your country, it's also in my country, in Germany, but I'm originally from Turkey, and also in Turkey and many other countries. The conditions are getting worse and worse for people with migration, refugee, and asylum-seeking background, but also the worst positions are seen in irregular migrants. So in systematic reviews, it is highlighted that, of course, the psychological distress of these undocumented migrants are higher in comparison to others. But one issue I would like to underline, that the separation from their family, particularly traumatic children and young people, has the hugest impact of their mental health issues. And just to underline that better health was associated in this group of irregular migrants with larger social networks, not only treatment issues, but larger social networks. So the process of regularization positively influences, of course, their mental health conditions, but it does not directly impact self-reported health of these irregular migrants. So it is important that they have social networks, support in this area. Now looking to these people, access to mental health care. We know communication is very important. It is not only verbal communication, it's also body language and other issues. But in a study in our hospital done in the emergency room, colleagues could find if there is a language difficulty in understanding each other, it is a significant risk factor for de-escalation and for involuntary treatment and involuntary hospitalization and coercion. This was not surprising us, but we have now data which underlines this issue. So it is very important to understand your patient and to be understood by your patient. Administrative barriers, asylum-seeking procedures or other issues, really very, very difficult to do it. And many other issues, of course. Rejection of patients because they are immigrants or refugees because of, I don't know, expecting much more work with them. This is the reality. Yes, it is so. If you use an interpreter, you need much more time to work with these people. And one issue is very important, the Asylum Seekers Benefit Act. You know that the legislation stipulates that the member states of the European Union have a legal obligation to provide for the social and health needs of asylum seekers. But restrictive legislation can hinder needs-based access to mental health care and lead to health inequalities, which is the reality in many countries. So there are many barriers. These are pictograms which we created in a European Union-funded project, My Health. It was done by Migrantas, a cooperation partner in Germany. So to see these pictograms, you know what is written on them. So language barriers, new life, or due to forced inactivity, not allowed to do something, or family left behind, family separation, decent housing needed, and so on, but also not a terrorist. If you have some kinds of cloth, you can be stigmatized, and so on, or migrants' job. If you see this picture, migrants, we have a lot of people who have an academic career and so on, certification, but their certificates are not allowed. It takes a long time to be accepted and so on, and they need something to do, and they sometimes cleaning. They take cleaning jobs. And I think this is really a shame, because these resources are not used. And we need these resources. We need experts in many, many fields. Access to healthcare. This is regarding Poland issues. You know that here it is very similar. So you have the possibility to access in Poland the healthcare system. It is much easier in comparison to Germany, for example. And looking also to all these issues, there are possibilities that you can get support. But in Poland, the language problem is still existing. So you do not have enough interpreters and not the possibility to pay them, so you cannot understand your patients. It's a tricky issue, but you need to understand them. Otherwise, you cannot diagnose and you cannot treat them in an equal way. And you can make false diagnoses, false treatments, and increase the suffering of the patients, for example, and so on. The problem or the issue regarding refugees from Ukraine are a little bit different. They are not seen as refugees in comparison to others. Here, the asylum-seeking procedure is suspended, so they are allowed from the first day to be integrated. They can work, they can take private accommodations and other issues. In my opinion, ethical principles are here out of force, so suspended. That means that no equal treatment of refugees from Ukraine are treated in another way in comparison to refugees from Afghanistan or elsewhere. So this is, in my opinion, a structural discrimination of other refugees by the politics implemented by the tops. So, but at the same time, this is an example to show that integration can work if we want it. If it is wished, it can work. So my appeal would be integrate all of them, and the suffering would be less, and we need these people for work or other issues. So this is regarding new development in Poland. You know it much better than me, so I can skip it. And just to inform you or underline that there is a difference to enter your country because the borders are much more closer than in Germany, and also numbers of visas will be cut down and so on. But looking to the labor market, Poland needs really new hands, experts and other issues. So therefore it's a tricky situation. Now looking to ethics, I would like to underline a few aspects also of the ethics. You know that ethics has been derived from Greek word ethikos. meaning rules of conduct that govern natural dispositions in human beings. Ethics means principles of right conduct. And we know that this term ethics captures a variety of moral standards and values being held by a person with himself, but also in his society and in his circumstances. And this necessity to develop specific ethical regulations for psychiatry was formally noted by the American Psychiatric Association in the 60s because of many, many malpractice or maltreatments and so on. And the APA, therefore, developed the first code of ethics for psychiatry. It was in 1963. The EPA, the European Psychiatric Association, did it in 2021, more than 50 years ago, or approximately 50 years ago. So it is known that many, many malpractices are going on in psychiatry nowadays too. Therefore, we need code of ethics for our professions. So ethics are including many issues, of course, research, of course, values, rules of conduct, ethical practices, moral principles, and so on. But it touched also the objective of professional ethics. It touched the diagnostic procedure, informed consent. You should inform your consent and receive the informed consent, voluntarily, involuntary treatment issues, confidentiality, but also respect for our patients and his human rights, and third-party responsibilities, if somebody pays you or something like that, and psychiatric research, not to harm patients or people in this regard. And ethical principles were described at the first time in 1983 by Beachcamp and Childress. These principles are autonomy, respect for the person, beneficence, doing good, non-maleficence, not doing harm, and justice, treating people fairly. So understanding these principles, we know that each principle plays a crucial role in guiding us through challenging decisions, ensuring that patients' rights and welfare remain a priority in our work. Furthermore, we have conflicts and ethical dilemmas, and ethical principles provide the framework, tools which may facilitate us and our society to resolve conflict in a fair, just, and moral manner. Furthermore, in wartime, for example, or in times of crisis, these principles can be challenged. We should be aware of it, requiring psychiatrists us to navigate complex moral dilemmas while prioritizing patients' welfare. Furthermore, there could be ethical dilemmas in our daily work, of course, value conflicts. There could be no clear consensus as to the right thing to do or not to do. A conflict between moral obligations that are difficult to reconcile and require moral reasoning. Situations necessitating a choice between two equal, maybe usually undesirable alternatives. What is right, what is not right, what should I do? And for example, governments in many countries, in Germany, in Sweden, and others, want health professionals, us, to report undocumented migrants seeking care to the police and migration authorities. Health professionals should not be obliged to report undocumented migrants so that they can be deported. In Germany, many cases were seen, so the police came to your hospital and want to take out one patient, but it is your house, it is your responsibility. So we do not give our patient to the police at that time, but there are some colleagues, they do. So this is a tricky issue. What is the ethical principles in this case? And there is a huge criticism regarding this issue. Another ethical problem, the role as psychiatrists, as we, in connection with the deportation of refugees, for example, we are asked to write certificates to the immigration authorities and to police if patients are deportable. It is not my job to do it, but I am asked to do it, also to immigration office to say, to write if this patient is really ill or not, if it's transportable or not, and so on. This is not my job, but I am obliged to do it. Sometimes we do it if we see that this patient is not transportable, we write it. But if a patient is transportable, we do not do it. The authorities expect us to medicate patients sometimes to calm them down so that they can be deported by air or by train or by else else things. This may include compulsory medication. We are asked to give medication to patients so that they are possible to be transported. What can we do? Should we do it or not? Ethical dilemmas, how to deal with psychiatric assessment and treatment of detainees awaiting deportation is also. There are many, many other dilemmas, but these are some of them. And we are responsible, and ethical demands, we must uphold the responsibilities and ethical demands of the medical profession, of us, of course, and specific psychiatry and working with mental health conditions. We shall not discriminate our patients based on age, of course, sex, gender, ethnicity, religion, or political affiliation, or social standing, criminal background, or other issues. Maybe also migration background. We shall not. We must never endorse and participate in discriminatory status. Furthermore, practicing ethical psychiatry requires, of course, awareness, sensitivity, and empathy for the patient as an individual, including his or her cultural values, beliefs, and so on. Please remember the ethical principles: autonomy, respect for the person, beneficent, doing good, non-maleficent, not doing harm, and justice, treating people fairly, equal. We psychiatrists hold the obligation to advocate for universal health care for everyone and fair and appropriate prevention, care, treatment, and rehabilitation for individuals with mental disorders within available, of course, resources in our respective countries. Which kind of resources do we have? And if we have these resources, we should treat our patients fairly again. Furthermore, we must stay respectful in communication with our patients, with staff, of course, with staff too, relatives and so on. Should promote education of our patients, relatives and so on, to empower them to be able in the joining or participating in decision-making processes. If they do not know what are the pros and cons, alternatives, and other issues, they cannot take part in this decision-making process. We shall not accept as proxy decision makers for their patients, for our patients, of course, and need to stay respectful of our patient decisions and ensure patients' rights to express their will. In case of coercion, for example, restrain compulsory medication. If the patient does not want this medication, what should we do? Should we give him it involuntarily or not? Does he harm himself or us? What is going on? We have to be careful with these issues. And we should inform our patient about diagnostic, but also therapeutic procedures, promote their autonomy, and always seek their informed consent. In many countries, I know it also from Turkey, for example, the medical doctor and patient relationship is a very hierarchical system. So the doctor knows everything and the patient says yes to everything. There is, not in all parts of Turkey, but in some parts, there is no discussion about alternatives and other issues. In Germany, for example, this relationship is lower hierarchical. It is something like partnership in high positions, and you can discuss about alternative, about diagnostic procedures, medications, and so on. So you support the decision-making process of your patient, and of course, you seek their informed consent for all issues. In other parts, you decide this medication is good for you, so you have to take it, and that was it. So the ethical principles are not going according this line. We shall not as proxy for migration policies. This is also a very important issue. Now, recommendations. What should we recommend? The primary duty of a physician, psychiatrist, for example, is to promote the health and well-being of individual patients by providing competent, timely, and compassionate care in accordance with good medical practice and professionalism. Therefore, our association, European Psychiatric Association, recommends strategies to mitigate the impact of war displacement and related trauma. and therefore action to identify issues relating to the mental health of migrants, refugees, but also displaced people are important. They should be done. We should not talk about it, so we should implement it also. The development of strategies to enable mental health professionals, so us, to appropriately treat those severely traumatized by torture, violence, rape, death, and other traumatized experiences. So I have met many, many patients with really very adverse life-threatening events. They are severely traumatized. They need help. We have to help them. And I cannot say, sorry, I cannot do it because of this or that. So treating people fairly. Member societies, for example, the Polish Association of Psychiatry, to raise awareness and improve the basic knowledge and skills of psychiatric and mental health professionals regarding the care of refugees and displaced people. So this is a recommendation of the EPA. We ask you to do it. We demand for equal treatment of all refugees and displaced persons without any discrimination and exclusion, according to ethical principles. Facing ethical dilemmas is the topic. Adherence to the ethical principles which, when dealing with mentally ill refugees and migrants, in accordance with the UN resolution of the principles for the protection of persons with mental illness. So there are many other recommendations, so we can go on. Again, repeating the ethical principles. Complex relationship between culture, values, ethics in mental health care. So cultural competence. Cultural competence is the possibility to work with patients, with people from different backgrounds, to be able to work with an interpreter, to be able to get information about the background of my patient, and so on. Again, cultural competence is a practical, concrete demonstration of the ethical principles of respect for a person, beneficent, non-maleficent justice. And these are the cornerstones of modern ethical codes for the health professionals. I'm coming now to the end of my presentation. There is an EU Charter of Fundamental Rights in which it is outlined that the notion of a universal right to access healthcare, stating everyone has the right of access to preventive healthcare and the right to benefit from medical treatment under the conditions established by national laws and practices. And a high level of human health protection shall be ensured in the definition and implementation of all union policies and activities. Furthermore, this is my last slide. So, seeing that health is a human right, because in 1938, WHO said health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. Health is a resource for everyday life, not the objective of living, and is a fundamental human right recognized in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Thank you very much for your attention.
Meryam, thank you very much for this fascinating lecture for you. So this was fantastic. Thank you for giving this lecture.
Oh, thank you.
Some for you.
Oh,
and
thank you so much.
Because it is the open lecture, and then you have some question, and please, I open this discussion now, please.
Dear Professor, my name is Joanna Niesnalowska, and I teach ethics at this school. It's both Polish and English program students, and I hope a lot of my secondary students are here. Are you here? Are you? You've a voice? Yeah. Some of them are here. Great. This week in Polish program, we are discussing ethical issues connected to mental health and psychiatry, so brilliant timing. I have two questions for you first. You mentioned that you are a very rare bird, just 2 or 3 of you globally, the professor of intercultural psychiatry. So my first question, how do you think, why is this professorship so rare? Don't we need more? And secondly, if I might, because I wouldn't like to monopolize the question section. Secondly, I'd like to ask you about your experience and wisdom about involuntary treatment using medically justified coercion in the context of taking care of people that already have experience of unjustified coercion and involuntary treatment. How do you do this without, aggravating the harm? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for these very important questions. First of all, intercultural psychiatry and psychotherapy, or transcultural, they are very similar terms. In my opinion, it is, you can say transcultural, you can say intercultural or cultural, it doesn't matter, but we need much more of these professorships or of these teachers, because you see that 281 million international migrants and increasing number of forcibly displaced people. So in Germany, we had more than 30% of the population with a migration background. And this is not a number which we can ignore. It is a huge population. And many of the colleagues till now ignore this issue. Of course, they say, okay, I can manage it and this and that and so on. Many of them use Google Docs, or not Google Translate, or I don't know, digital translation possibilities, but we looked for these translation possibilities. They are really very tricky. I'm not sure, I do not use them because there are many faults in it. So in my opinion, we need much more expert in this field. This is the first question. I don't know why it has no lobby. Maybe this is the point, but it should have much more, because it is, you can see it needed. We need these expertise, and we need this information and teaching possibilities and so on. The second question was regarding involuntary treatment with medication. How do we manage it? The first one is we have different models. In our hospital, for example, we use the Wedinger model. That means that you should talk to the patient, not only use coercion, force, or something like that. So the escalation trainings. We have found in a study that the first 24 hours, if a patient is admitted involuntarily to hospital, is very, very important. In these 24 hours, if you can get down the patient, de-escalate the condition, it is possible to be quite normal, to be not aggressive, to understand the patient. This is the point. You have to understand the patient. As mentioned before, not being understood and can understand the patient, language difficulties, is a significant risk factor for de-escalation. So if you train your staff with de-escalation skills, we do it, basic training, and then every year refreshment and so on. If you train your staff, and if you train your staff also working with translators or interpreters to also in these very complicated conditions to touch the patient via using his language and so on, this is very helpful. And really, in our hospital, we talk always with the patient, also together in teams. When we talk about the patient, sometimes the patient is there. We talk not about the patient, we include him. Maybe this is also a good de-escalation concept.
Okay, I have a question for Victor. Yes, please.
Yes, so my name is Ava, and I have a question about, for example, we have many young children who are like alone, without their parents, like the minimum age I had with me in my class was like 12 years old, and they were really in need of help. How do we how do we try to follow this ethical rule with, for example, consent when we have to deal with children? The first question, and the second question is, are there, for example, gender-based, for example, new position, or how we say gender-based sick or platforms, for example, the female patient have more of these, develop more of these like disturbance, while male patient of the other. Is like.
The first question I could understand very good, the second one not so well. Maybe first to the first question, children and minors. You mean minors. We have a lot of minors who arrived here alone without accompanying of relatives or parents and so on. The best way, they need guardians, of course. And you can ask the guardians, but the best way to integrate them is to integrate them in schools. Or if they are adolescents, to give them a job or something, to integrate them in schools and to integrate them in, how do we tell it, in the real life. So this is very important. Another issue is, in my opinion, art therapy or other occupational therapies and other issues. It's not only talking therapeutic approaches like psychotherapy. It could be also occupational therapy, music therapy, I don't know what else, creative therapies to touch them or to get in touch or to build a good relationship. And they need really supporters, networking, social networking, and so on, social support. And the second question I couldn't get.
For example, like I have like what I've seen, I think through like female and refugees, especially those who have like, for example, which cover their hair, have experienced more racism than, for example, male refugees. Or for example, when we also see like male refugees, for example, what I've experienced or what I have noticed is they are like more hesitant to go to treatment. Like, are there anything what you can maybe tell us more about the gender difference?
Yeah, this is also a very good question. Thank you very much for it. Yes, people with headscarves or men with birth are much more stigmatized or discriminated. And we know now from discrimination issues that discrimination is a risk factor for developing mental health disorder or mental disorders. And there is a profiling in our mind. If you can see what is going on regarding police controls and so on. If you have a bath and you look like a Syrian or I don't know where else, are you coming, maybe you are not coming from this part, they assume that you come from these parts, you are always controlled. Also, if you have a headscarf or if you are dressed like an Arabic woman and so on, the discrimination issues are much higher, or people of color are faced many forms of racism and also structural racism. And this is really hurting the people a lot. And of course, they are much more developing mental disorders. For example, microaggression, these are every day living in these conditions that somebody hurts you every day, day by day. It brings you to a chronic stress condition, and of course you develop stress-related disorders. So their health conditions are much worse in comparison to others because of these issues. Additionally, issues, not only the issues which we had in the past, before the migration, during the migration, these are so-called post-migration living difficulties.
I am Schouler. I'm from the second year medicine English program, and I had a question about the slide you have. And you mentioned in the slide that people with more severe mental issues are more hesitant to approach mental care facilities. And I wanted to ask you how we could change it, or how we could maybe encourage them to seek help.
Mm-hmm. This is also a very good question. Thank you very much. In our study 2016-17, we found that people who were really in a huge traumatized condition seek less help in comparison to others because they were not able to to go to the mental health, to access the mental health services. So nowadays it is easier to reach these people. These are so-called heavy to reach groups. It's better to reach them via their communities. And we try to contact key persons in the communities, and we distribute the information about mental health care services, access to mental health care. We are also mentioning that we are working with interpreters, and people are coming then, but it's difficult for them to come because they are suffering from many, many issues.
Thank you very much. Question or auditorium or oh, please.
I want to ask if someone is interested in this field, and since there is very few professors who are specialized in it, what's the way for us who are interested to get actually in this field and to get the knowledge if we are not in contact with people, or we aren't able to get in contact with people who are actually specialized?
This is also a good question. It depends on your possibilities in your university, on the lectures and so on. It is one way, but there are also possibilities to join, for example, CME courses during the EPA congresses or other issues, or make master theses or PhDs and so on abroad, for example, in Germany or UK or where else, so to get much more qualified in this area, and then to spread your knowledge in your country, like snowballing. This could be a good idea, but I'm sure in Poland there are also colleagues who are also expert in this field. Maybe Professor Samachowicz we will try to collaborate. Maybe there is a possibility to build here also a center for cultural psychiatry or something like that. Sorry? In Germany, we have many, of course, at Charité, we have the research unit on intercultural migration and mental health care services, social psychiatry. We have many possibilities to do something there. We have also other professors who are interested in this topic. We have also in Germany, but also in other, in Mannheim, in München, in different parts of Germany, there are universities which are also very interested in this topic. For example, it is a main topic in the German Center on Mental Health, which is networked in 6 big universities or areas.
May I? Yes, Meryam, thank you very much for your lecture.
Thank you.
Found the time to come to our university. You've been to our department. You've seen the good examples of positive integration. We have colleagues from Ukraine who are doing residency in my department, to fantastic medical doctors even present today. We wanted to also do the research on this topic. But tell me, what is your idea? I know politics is something much different from ethics and transcultural psychiatry. We hear what is going on from television, from our friends, that the political background in Germany changes, and through that, what you said, so many migrants, and do you think for the future that there should be a pan-European law regarding regulating these migration issues, or, for example, more help into those countries who are having those people coming from dangerous countries? What is your idea about? I know this is just answer. I have a dream that we are living in the ideal world, but world is as we have now. So especially due to these conditions, what we find it in Europe and as yet.
Thank you very much. Europe has how many states? 28? Okay, 28 states. To bring them all under an umbrella is very, very difficult. So they have common laws. For example, the asylum seeking procedure is a European law also, but the states have their own regulations too. In my opinion, it's very, very difficult to bring them all under an umbrella. It's also a dream of me to bring them under to create the same conditions, but it's not possible because of limitations in some countries. But the right-wing parties are increasing in different parts of Europe, in Germany too. So in eastern part of Germany, we have a great problem because of the AfD, you know, Alternative for Germany. It's not an alternative, it's another kind of political party, but it's very difficult. Many colleagues of me do not want to go to the eastern part of Germany because of these developments. So how can we change the conditions that people do not come to Europe, for example? For example, from Syria, we are not able to change the political conditions there. We tried it in Afghanistan, it was a disaster. In Syria, I don't have an imagination. In African countries, we tried to make some agreements, it doesn't work. It's very difficult. And additionally, we will receive not only wars, we will have also climate change, and therefore we will receive much more people than now. So this is a dream to close the doors, but I'm sure it is not possible because of increasing numbers of crises, increasing numbers of... The world is changing, and not in a better way. So I have also the dream that we will manage all these issues, but I'm not sure. I don't know. It's difficult.
Hello, so my question is about the cause of the mental health issues that are happening to the refugees. Because sometimes when the refugees come to a place or a country, they want to try to find a place, safe place to live and to help themselves from the bad things that happened to them, all around the world. And sometimes I think, and this is my opinion, that the mental health issues happen because of actions that refugees take in a country. For example, Poland is a very traditional country, and when we are welcoming people here, we want them to respect our tradition, our culture. So, is there a good idea to have big information campaign about, for example, tradition in countries and tradition all around Europe that can give the information for the refugees so they can have more respect and more welcoming feelings here, not only in Poland, but also around the Europe?
Yeah. This is a really very tricky question, but it's a good question. Thank you for it. We all have our cultures. I have my culture, you have your culture, you have your culture. It is not overlapping. We have an overlapping part, but we have sometimes great differences. And between our cultures and the cultures of some refugees are really very huge. To expect from them that they adapt to our cultures in a very short time is not possible. So, you know, the acculturation process has many stages, and it takes time. In 10 years, in 20 years, for example, Turkish people in Germany, it's now in 4th generation. Many of them are adapted. Many of them do feel them as the Germans, so they need time. Also, these refugees, you can tell them your cultural values, your cultural believings, and your cultural issues, rituals, and other issues. For example, Christmas issues and so on. But you cannot overwhelm them with these new values and traditions and so on. This means that you took them and put them in another world, from one day to the other day. So that means that they will get ill. So this is not the way. So they need time. I can understand your feelings, your beliefs, your thoughts, and so on, but this is not possible. That means if you emigrate to, I don't know, Africa, so to a country, you also expect that your culture is also respected. So it is very difficult to expect that they give all their values, all their beliefs, cultures overboard and take over yours. It's not possible. Just to mention it, they need time. I'm sure they will accept it once if they are integrated, but it is step by step. If you want them integrate in your culture, in your state, and so on, then you have to give them time to adapt.
Thank you very much. I don't see other questions from colleagues. Thank you very much once again. It is